In plants, photosynthesis occurs in specialized organelles called chloroplasts. The internal membranes of chloroplasts are organized into special sacs called thylakoids. Surrounding the thylakoid membrane system is a semi-liquid substance called stroma. Photosynthetic pigments are clustered together to form photosystems. When a proton of light strikes the reaction center of photosystem 2, it excites an electron. Two water molecules bind to an enzyme at the reaction center. This enzyme splits the water and uses the electrons from the water to replace the electrons removed from the reaction center. Oxygen is produced in this process. The primary electron acceptor for the light-energized electrons leaving the photosystem 2 is a plastoquinone. The reduced plastoquinone passes the excited electrons to a proton pump embedded in the membrane called the B6X complex. Arrival of the energetic electrons causes the B6F complex to pump protons across the stroma into the thylakoid space, thereby generating a proton gradient across the membrane. Because the thylakoid membrane is impermeable to protons, the protons in the stroma must pass through the channels provided by ATP synthase. As protons pass through, ADP is phosphorylated to ATP and released into the stroma. This process for making ATP is referred to as photophosphorylation. And when photosystem 1 absorbs a photon of light, its reaction center passes high-energy electrons to ferredoxin. The enzyme NADP reductase then transfers the electrons to NADP to form NADPH. Electrons lost from photosystem 1 are replaced by electrons generated from photosystem 2. A small protein called PC then carries the electrons from the B6F complex to photosystem 1. The Calvin cycle, also known as the dark reaction in photosynthesis. ATP and NADPH produced by the light reactions are used in the Calvin cycle, or the dark reactions, to produce carbon dioxide to sugar. The Calvin cycle is similar to the Krebs cycle in that the starting material is regenerated by the end of the cycle. Carbon enters the Calvin cycle and leaves as sugar. ATP is the energy source, while NADPH is the reducing agent that adds high-energy electrons to form sugar. The Calvin cycle actually produces a 3-carbon sugar glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. The Calvin cycle may be divided into 3 steps. Step 1, carbon fixation. This phase begins when a carbon dioxide molecule is attached to a 5-carbon ribulose biphosphate, RUBH. This reaction is catalyzed by the enzyme RUBPH carboxylase rubisco, one of the most abundant proteins on the earth. The products of this reaction is an unstable 6-carbon compound that immediately splits into 2 molecules of 3-phosphorylglycerate. Step 2, reduction. This endergonic reaction phase is a 2-step process that couples ATP hydrolysis with the reduction of 3-phosphorylglycerate to glyceraldehyde phosphate. An enzyme adds a phosphate by transferring a phosphate from the ATP. The product is 1,3-biphosphorylglycerate. Electrons from the NADPH reduce the carboxyl group of the 1,3-biphosphorylglycerate to the aldehyde group of glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. For every 3 carbon dioxide molecules that enter the Calvin cycle, 3 glyceraldehyde 3-phosphates are produced. Only 1 can be counted as a net gain. The other 5 are used to regenerate 3 molecules of RUBP. Step 3. Regeneration of RUBP. A complex series of reactions rearranges the carbon skeletons of 5 glyceraldehydes 3-phosphate molecules into 3 RUBP molecules. These reactions require 3 ATP molecules, and then RUBP is thus regenerated to begin the cycle again.
And now for part 2, C4 and CAM photosynthesis. C4 is called this because the CO2 is first incorporated into a 4-carbon compound. The stomata are open during the day. This uses PEP carboxylase for the enzymes involved in the uptake of CO2. This enzyme allows the CO2 to be taken into the plant very quickly, and then it delivers the CO2 directly to Rubisco for photosynthesis. Photosynthesis takes place in the inner cells. It is good because it photosynthesizes faster than the C3 plants under high light intensity and high temperatures, because the CO2 is delivered directly into the rubisco, not allowing it to grab oxygen and undergo photorespiration. It has better water use efficiency because the PEP carboxylase brings in CO2 faster, and so it does not need to keep the stomata open as much. C4 plants include several thousand species in at least 19 plant families. An example would be corn. CAM stands for Crassulacean acid metabolism. It's called CAM because the plant family in which it was first found, and because the CO2 is stored in the form of acid before photosynthesis. The stomata is open at night when evaporation rates are usually lower and usually closed during the day. The CO2 is converted into an acid and stored during the night. During the day, the acid is broken down and the CO2 is released to rubisco for photosynthesis. It has an advantage because the better water use efficiency than C3 plants and under arid conditions due to opening in stomata at night when transpiration rates are lower. There's no sunlight, lower temperatures, lower wind speeds. May CAM idle. When conditions are extremely arid, CAM plants can just leave their stoma closed night and day. Oxygen given off in photosynthesis is used for respiration, and CO2 given off in respiration is used for photosynthesis. This is a little like perpetual energy machine. But there are costs associated with running the machinery for respiration and photosynthesis, so the plant cannot CAM idle forever. But CAM idling does allow the plant to survive dry spells and allows the plant to recover very quickly when water is available again, unlike plants that drop their leaves and twigs and go dormant during dry spells. CAM plants include many things such as cactuses.
Aren't you glad that photosynthesis exists? What? With just 6 H2O, water, and 6 CO2, carbon dioxide? And then there's a little bit of work in the leaves with the chloroplast and stroma and thylakoid and stuff. You get 6 O2, oxygen that we all need to breathe, and then you get C6H12O6, also known as sugar. I know it may not be this kind of sugar, but we all like this kind of sugar. Let me get a bite of that. We all like it. It tastes good. Yeah. You want some? Yeah, she's diabetic. She can't have sugar.